Story 1. I would focus more on long-term goals and less on short-term pressures. I would take more risks, knowing I would have time to recover, and I would invest in learning new skills and experiences without feeling rushed. It would be all about pacing myself and making the most of that extra time. Story 2. If I had 200 years to live, I would explore multiple careers, continuously learn new skills, and take more time to travel and experience different cultures. Story 3. It depends on what part of my life gets extended. There is a huge difference between being a child for an extra 100 years compared to being around 80 for an extra 100 years. Story 4. I would invest in learning multiple fields, explore every corner of the world, and take time to master skills and hobbies. With more time, the possibilities for growth and adventure would be endless. Story 5. Your question is a little unclear. What does extending your lifespan to 200 years mean? Does it mean you would continue aging like you normally do? If that is so, then at 80 to 90, when people are falling apart, they would basically be catatonic and literally unable to move from their bed at ages 100 to 200. Or does it mean that it will be a normal aging pattern that is just doubled in length? Like we become adults at 36 instead of 18, and the new 40 will be the current 20? Does it mean that no matter what risks you take or accidents you get into, you won't die until 200? Or does it mean that your natural lifespan is until 200 but you can die if something otherwise fatal happens to you? Story 6. Did science recently conclude that the human body is theoretically capable of living to 140 or so? That's already too long. If I had to live to 200, I'd take a gap decade for sure. I wouldn't be in such a rush to settle down and be typical. I say yes to way more things. I'd get arrested for doing something exciting with friends. I wouldn't let the one who got away get away again. All in all, I guess I'd live. Story 7. Would that mean I'd have to work until I'm like 170? No thanks. Or have enough money in a superannuation fund to keep me going for another 100 years? No way. Nah, I'm happy to go off anywhere above 80. Story 8. I guess it would depend on how it works. Would being 80 be like the equivalent of being a teenager? Or would I feel like a current 80-year-old and just be aging even more for another 120 years? Because that would be torture. Story 9. Will I be 100 years old at 100 and just rot for 100 more years? Or will my aging be spread out over 200 years? If it's the first, I would just end my life. If it's the second, then I would probably go back to school for something that actually makes money. Story 10. I wouldn't have picked up smoking cigarettes, and I would try to engage in more intimate relationships. Maybe less drinking. The cocaine was probably not needed. A better diet and exercise. Go to college. Story 11. Probably off myself one day. How lonely do you think you would get? How much could you take? I always found this to be the most profound scene in Highlander, when Connor loses Heather to old age while he doesn't get old. Heartbreaking. Story 12. That sounds like a nightmare scenario. I would move away from everything and everyone I know and incrementally keep doing that for the rest of my life. I think I would get so bored of living that I would probably find ways to only live to 70 to 80. 200 is too much. Story 13. I am not even 40 yet, and I am already tired and bored. Even the things I am not entirely over only provide a fraction of the pleasure that they used to, and it dwindles more each year. I also like people less and less. After being betrayed, mistreated, and used by so many, I see them for what they are. 160 more years sounds like a hellish sentence. Hard pass. Double it and pass it to the next person. Story 14. I would definitely slow down and savor life more. I would take my time exploring every hobby I have ever wanted to try. Maybe become a master chef, learn to play every instrument, and finally read all those books on my list. I would also plan to travel to every corner of the globe. Story 15. Certainly depends on the situation. Assuming 100 years as the original standard, we are talking about doubling my lifespan. What does that mean on a practical level? Will my current body now revert to what it was half my lifetime ago? Will age at half its usual rate? Does it mean it looks the same but internally functions like a younger body? For example, do men in this situation have a longer expectation of virility? Are women able to conceive and carry children for a longer period? Story 16. When you accidentally reply in your native language to someone who doesn't speak it, and then have to awkwardly translate for them. Been there, done that. Story 17. I would go around selling sugar in little transparent bags for $100,000 each and call it the elixir of life or something like that to people who want to be immortal like me. Probably would have to start this at the 150th year or so that people believe me. Story 18. If I had 200 years to live, I might stop counting the wasted months without rest and focus on learning new skills, traveling more, and pursuing hobbies. Story 19. I'd put more effort into educating myself for job and private purposes. I'd probably also be more picky with long-term stuff like looking for a job, house, or country to live in, etc. Story 20. I would enroll in law school. I think I would make a good lawyer. I can both think creatively and I love sticking to rules of administration. I feel I have missed my chance as I am 37, and it is just not feasible for me to try now. But if I still had like 170 years, of course I would go for it. Story 21. An idea I have been contemplating for a while, thanks to shows like Firein and other shows where the main character lives far longer than the rest of the population, is what effect living longer would have on how we view ethics and morality. These people often make choices and think in ways that often don't make sense to regular people. Personally, if I lived 200 years, I would be more careful about the mistakes I would make. I would have to live with the consequences longer. Story 22. I suppose that would depend on what that extension means for the normal deterioration of our bodies. Do I have to spend about 100 years as a 70-year-old? Or does aging itself just slow down across the whole lifespan? Story 23. I'd start a cult based around nature and taking care of it properly. I've always wanted to do so anyway. If I were forced to be around 200 more years, I need to be in nature and feel I'm affecting nature more. Having 5 wives, as he whom the water speaks to, would be nice too, I guess. Story 24. Mostly nothing. The only changes I might make would be taking notes and chronicling events and various things. Heck, even now it's been a passing thought of something I wish I had already done. Often, I see some people's interpretation of a certain decade or historical event, and I just sit there thinking, that's not at all how any of that went down. In what reality were you living when that happened? Also, it would be nice to have the ability to give voice to the intentions of the time, not that I am or would be important enough for anybody to listen to me. But imagine if the Founding Fathers were still alive today and, instead of debating the wording and meaning of various amendments of the U.S. Constitution, you could just ask the authors, even though certain people would refuse to listen to them. Story 25. Invest aggressively. The first few decades would be a struggle, but after a while, compounding interest will take over. I would also like to do a long odyssey and travel everywhere. Story 26. Just do not. Have I suffered enough? Laugh out loud. But if so and I cannot die, I will find a lot of domestic abusers. But tell the police beforehand that I am immortal. I would not want to be in jail. Story 27. Actually, we are pretty close to solving a lot of those issues. Since feminism has tanked birth rates, they will make it so people live and work well past 100. Story 28. Assuming that my body slows down in aging proportionally and does not become a vegetable for the 2nd century, I plan to work at least through age 120 to 130 and invest accordingly. Story 29. That depends. Do our cells continue to replicate without issue, or are we going to be Deadpool levels of cancer-ridden, what with aging being the biggest cause of a majority of cancers and all that? Story 30. I can't think of many things more sad than seeing everyone you love age and die. Your partner, your children, their children, etc. For starters, this is enough for me to nope out on this one. I lost my parents at a somewhat young age, but I also saw my grandparents lose their children. Certain aunts and uncles died before their parents did too. Basically, it was awful. Being middle-aged now, I find myself tired and bored of the repetition and predictability of way too many cultural products. So much stuff is aimed at young adults, from high school to mid-20s, that every great piece of fiction that is lauded somehow seems predictable and childish nowadays. It's kind of like making yourself watch kids' cartoons or something. It's great that the little ones can enjoy it, but my requirements for a dopamine hit are different than when I was 19. Story 31. It depends. Do I still age at the same rate? Or is it that I hit puberty at age 40, middle age at 120, and retire at 180? If it's the former, I'd probably have a plan to end my life around age 80 or so. Most people become incapable of caring for themselves around that age or shortly thereafter. I can't imagine how bad and helpless I'd be having to live a century after that. If it's the latter, I'd probably just buy a bunch of stocks and bonds and hold them. Imagine 200 years of growth in your portfolio. Story 32. How do the various eras of life scale? Is childhood roughly the same length, but your prime era much longer? Because I don't want to be a frail 100-year-old with a further declining 100 years. That seems pretty miserable. Story 33. Do I age slower? Because if not, then probably not much change. While some people are lucky to be doing great at 100, most are not really mobile and have vision and hearing loss. So we are still kind of working with the same time frame to get out and do stuff. But maybe I will finally have time to watch all those TV shows I have not got around to yet. Story 34. It depends if I feel old by 100. If I would feel like 50 at 100, then I would do what I can. But if it just feels like another 100 years of feeling 100, then I would probably just die right there. Story 35. Probably stress a bit less and get as much as I can into savings and investment, since I'm going to live long enough to use it once it's adequately matured. Then back to my potato life day to day because it'll be out of sight, out of mind. But hopefully, at my midlife crisis, I'll be reassured instead of panicking harder. Story 36. I would go back to school and take my time learning some advanced subjects. I am not good at math, but if developmentally my lifespan were 300 years and I am still just an adolescent in that timescale, then I would take advantage of my brain's elasticity and learn more about physics, chemistry, and engineering. Time is on my side now. Story 37. I remember in the Middle Ages, our average age was about 33. Our lifespan has doubled compared to the Middle Ages. So I guess if we extend it to 200 years, changes would be similar, just with a longer working time. Story 38. Reading comprehension seems to be quite poor in this thread. The question was not whether everyone's lifespan is extended by 200 years. It is if yours is extended to 200 years, meaning just you, and you die at 200 years old. I would definitely make sure to maximize my pension since it is for life. Story 39. I would try to find a job that makes me develop even more friendships. The current place where I work, I have a few friends, but I wish I could extend those friendships through working at different places. Story 40. Well, instead of naturally dying in my 80s, I'd take matters into my own hands. Plus, who wants to live being 100 or more? I mean, the old jokes alone wouldn't be worth it. Story 41. Am I to be 80 years old for 120 years or 50 for 150 years? That changes everything. But either way, I will take care of my health, which I've been doing for a few months now. Story 42. Does that mean I have to keep working until I'm 180? And will I physically stay the same or will I age? If that is the case, I'll probably consider ending things around 90 plus. Story 43. Well, if you know you are going to live 200 years, that is a lot different than floating and not knowing how long you are going to live. I think I would focus a lot more on education. That is 2+ lifetimes, enough time to become an expert in at least 2 fields. Story 44. I'd need to be ready to invest well, but ultimately, I hope I would try to go out of my way to help more people, touch more lives in a simple way. Saying hello, a smile. It's something I wished I did more now. Story 45. Honestly, it would make sacrificing, working hard, and investing in the first few decades of your life more worth it. It would make much more sense to be dedicated to your job in your 20s and 30s if you were living to 200. Right now, it's not really worth it. Of course, all kinds of economic situations would be turned upside down with that kind of life expectancy. But the general idea still stays true. Story 46. I would live a normal life. I do everything a normal person does, but 5 to 10 years later. As I grow older, the gap widens. Living for 200 years would be nice, with no stress and at my own speed. Story 47. I would write a book stating I was there for historical events. Then, in the future, when asked for proof, I would bring up evidence of me being at that exact spot of the historical mark. I would be that time traveler. And when asked why I wasn't at events before I was born, I would state I was sleeping. It is a pity I missed the Victorian era. Their macaroni styles were whack. For the uncultured masses, macaroni meant modern fashion or fashionable. Now, that line from Yankee Doodle Dandy makes sense. Story 48. Going back to school would be an easier decision unless everything after turning 100 is like what it is already like, and you are just considered a dust bag who is expected to pay taxes. Story 49. This depends. Does this mean that as a 37-year-old, I now have the body and metabolism of my 18-year-old self? Or does middle age, 30 to 50, last until age 100? Meaning, instead of retiring at age 70 as planned, I retire at age 140? Story 50. How does my body hold up? Do I age at the same rate, or is 100 the new 50? What is the job market like for a 150-year-old? How compromised is the planet? Story 51. Work hard to eliminate money. Enlighten and raise or awaken the entirety of the consciousness of every human being on the planet so that we understand the meaning of everything and try to be beneficial to the host instead of the virus that we are. Story 52. It depends. Do I get extra health? Or am I still declining from my 50? Do I have to hide it? Or will nobody care as if it's common? Is it only me? Or do other people too get to live to 200? Does that mean nothing can kill me until I'm at least 200? Or am I just as mortal?